Hello, welcome. This is the Delgado reading series. Glad you're here. We've got some chairs if you want to sort of fill up down here. We've got 3 issues of Images magazine. Yeah, thank you very much for being here. There's also coffee and cookies on this table behind us. So we're here to enjoy reading from 2 speakers from the community, and also talk about Images, Delgado's literary magazine, the ones that are sitting right up here on these tables. And by tables, I of course mean chairs. So keep in mind, the Nason Smith Lit Prize this year is for comics and sequential art. So if you've ever had an interest in sketching out some comics, mixing text and imagery, submit some work. We've had, at this point, 0 submissions in the form of sequential art and comics. So if you submit a comic, you are probably going to win the contest, along with a $100 prize. If you'd like to learn more about submitting to Images, you can find me or this gentleman up here in the blazer, Sean Monroe, for more information. All right, let me turn this over to Ayanna Lovelady, who's going to introduce our speakers. Thanks, Ayanna.
All right, so our first speaker is Annell López. She is a Dominican immigrant and a 10-house scholarship finalist. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in Michigan Quarterly Review, Obar, The Pinch, and elsewhere. Annell is an assistant fiction editor for New Orleans Review. She is working on a collection of short series. You can follow her at Annell the Book Babe on Instagram and Annell López 2 on Twitter.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. Since that bio was written, I finished a collection of short stories, and I'm working on a novel. And hopefully you'll see the collection in your hands at some point soon. We're going to be hopeful, right? Got a tricky setup here. All right. I'm going to read to you a couple of short stories. It won't be too long, I promise. This is titled Love Language. My mother says that a drop of water, if persistent enough, will hollow out a stone. That a squeaky wheel, if loud enough, will get greased. As I watch Rodrigo, my husband, struggle to chew a forkful of spaghetti too big for his mouth, I wonder if I'm the wheel that squeaks or the water that drops. Rodrigo's doing that thing when he tries to force a smile out of politeness. I'm sure he hates the food, but it's likely he won't tell me. I watch him stab at a neat little pile of drenched in garlic-infused olive oil that I got out of bodega. He holds the spoon with his left hand, the fork with his right. He twirls the fork around hastily, gathering so many noodles we think that we have a damn thing to do after dinner. What's wrong, I ask? Though I'm aware of just how much is wrong. For one, the clams are from a can that sat on a dusty shelf. Yes, there's a seafood market down the street where sacks of fresh clams crowd a U-shaped countertop. But if I were to buy fresh clams and dinner were to be delicious or even edible, Rodrigo would just sit there ignoring me. We weren't always like this. The honeymoon period ended, so I guess other things died along the way. It's hard to say what exactly. Change is imperceptible sometimes. That is, until it accumulates and grows. Before you know it, a nuisance becomes a problem and a leak becomes a flood. You could say Rodrigo and I are standing in a puddle of water as we speak. Our socks are getting wet, and I'm wondering if we still have a chance. Rodrigo looks at me. A noodle dangles from the corner of his mouth. He slurps it up. Nothing's wrong, he says. Months ago, I sought my mother's advice. I asked her if she and my father still spoke each other's love language. She cackled so loudly, I had to move the phone away from my face. She said, "That's some white people shit." I take a sip of wine and I stare at his eyes. His crow's feet make his eyes look smaller than they are. Maybe it's not that they're so small, but that his forehead protrudes and his eyes are sunken, making him look more somber than he is. You hate it, I say. I don't. Yes, you do. Fine. The hard cast holding the broken pieces of my leg together is making my skin itch. I use a butter knife to scratch my leg. Rodrigo watches me but doesn't say a word. So what's wrong with the food? I wait for him to swallow the thick bulge of spaghetti he's been chewing. Why can't he see that I crave the sound of his voice? I'm expecting a straight answer, one that will let me know what he hates most. The garlic, the gummy chunks passing off his clams, or me. He finally swallows. I think it would have been better if you used fresh garlic or fresh herbs, he says. He's right, the dish is oily, the garlic tastes artificial, and who can forget about the clams? He puts his fork down and pushes the plate toward the middle of the table. It makes a faint scraping noise as it slides across the polished wood. You're not gonna finish it? He looks at me, drags the plate back, retrieves his fork, and then stabs at the little mound. Shoving noodles into his mouth, he chews them awkwardly, his mouth partially open. Did you know Gabe and Carla have been growing tomatoes and herbs in the courtyard? He says. They share with everyone. I'm well aware. Then why don't you go out there and grab some herbs or help or something? I don't mean to sneer, but I do. I have a broken leg, remember? You seem to pick and choose when that's a problem, he says. He could be referring to the fact that we haven't had sex since I broke my leg, or the fact that I spend a couple hours every day at the Portuguese bar down the street from our apartment. It's a short walk and about the only movement I get since I've been stuck here. My spending time at the bar bothers Rodrigo, though he has yet to explicitly tell me so. Though I've tried, I can't remember a time when our conversations didn't sound like this. Our relationship has corroded like a cheap necklace exposed to the elements. We barely speak, and no, I don't want to fuck someone who barely speaks to me. I get up from the table, my crutches are leaning against the wall next to me, but I don't grab them. I hop the short distance to the trash bin and dump the leftover food. I hop back to the table and grab Rodrigo's plate and dump his food too. The clatter of the plates in the sink and the thumping of every hop exasperate him. I can hear his heavy exhale. You want your crutches, he asks. What for? He grabs the crutches and brings them over to me, placing them against the side of the couch. My jacket smells like garlic, he says. That's a shame. He knows I don't mean it. I could have turned the fan on or opened the windows to let the densely fragrant air out. It's thick and pungent and hard to breathe. But with every petty argument I dig, I search for Rodrigo, for a spark in his stoic face, in his absent-minded touch. I find glimmers of emotion in his sarcastic tone, in the way he rolls his eyes or scoffs. I find my man there, so I keep coming back to him. That day, after she laughed at me over the phone, my mother mentioned rituals. Did I try wearing a red thong for 24 hours, then boiling said thong in a pair of my beloved's underwear? Did I place a figurine of San Antonio upside down because otherwise it won't work on top of a bed of flowers? And did I say a prayer asking for my beloved's eternal devotion? From her tone, I gathered that she thought I hadn't done enough. Rodrigo grabs the jacket, then turns the corner to our bedroom. I turn on the television and mindlessly flip through channels. It's what I do most these days. I sit here and put my leg up on the coffee table and give into the monotony of daytime TV. A short while back, before I broke my leg bouncing off a trampoline, trying to do something exciting with Rodrigo, I mocked people like my downstairs neighbor Gabe for watching so much drama. Gabe also spends a lot of time at home. He's a writer, and from what I can hear through the vents, a fan of soap operas and game shows. He and his wife have tried to befriend us. They're also in their 30s, but I'm not fond of Carla. There's this bohemian thing about her that makes me want to pull her hair. When she talks, she smiles too much and she nods repeatedly and paraphrases your sentences to let you know what a good listener she is. On TV, a group of contestants in MasterChef gear up for a 3-layer cake baking challenge. They sprint to the pantry. The oldest contestant brims with excitement. Basket in hand, she picks up an array of ingredients: berries, mint, heavy whipping cream. She's a self-taught baker who has been selling cakes to the parishioners at our local church for a decade. Cake is her love language. She mixes the batter by hand, leaning into it with the full weight of her shoulders. The cake rests, she pipes on the cream, smooths it out, then stacks one layer at a time. She arranges the assortment of berries and finishes with a light dusting of confectioner's sugar. The judges bite in, undoing in mere seconds what took so long to put together. The futility of all that effort. Behind the chatter of the TV, I hear a forceful clacking of Rodrigo's fingers against the keyboard. The tap, tap, tap of the backspace key makes it from our bedroom to the living room. There's no point in asking what he's writing. Emails, memos, invoices for the hotel. He'll be pounding away until the green glow of the clock on the cable box shows 11. A minute or so after, he will come out of our room for some whiskey, which he will drink in a single gulp before heading off to sleep. The weight of my head pulls me forward, my eyes open and close and open and close. I've been sleeping on the couch for 3 months. Our bed was already too high for me, and now it's almost impossible to climb onto it with the hard cast on my leg. You could say there were signs all along. Endless bickering followed by long periods of silence. Fissures we spackled and painted over. But when you're love buzzed and 20, you think you can make it through anything. But then 10 years go by and you find yourself at a trampoline park, a lousy date you planned trying to recapture the glee you felt years ago. And on that trampoline, you close your eyes because it feels like you're flying until you land awkwardly, hearing nothing but the snap of a bone. I turn off the TV, I get under the blanket and squint at the lamp next to the couch. I watch the ring of colors that forms in the light until it begins to blur. I wonder if Rodrigo is thinking of me. After Rodrigo leaves for work in the morning, I decide to get basil from the courtyard. Tonight I'll make something fresh, something he might love, like a watermelon basil salad to start. Maybe if I make an effort, this evening will be different. It's what my mother would do. It's what she did when my father left us. When I was a kid, my father moved out of the house for some time. He'd fallen in love with a woman at work. Her name was Rosalina. She spoke in a soft voice and always made eye contact. We would run into her at church, at the laundromat, at the bakery. She would make my father an elaborate upside-down pineapple flan every year for his birthday. And so every year, we savor that flan, plucking the maraschino cherries one by one, dipping our fingers in the caramel that pooled at the bottom of the pan. My father's decision to leave nearly broke my mother, but she was determined to get him back. One day, she walked into her kitchen holding a piece of paper with Rosalina's name written on it. She grabbed a lighter and set the paper on fire. I watched the flame eat at every cursive loop. Later that week, she wrote my father's name over the bottom of her shoes and wore them for hours, pacing back and forth, each step an imploration. I get dressed and I head to the back door of our apartment. I rarely use the back door. Rodrigo uses it when he tries to sneak out for a smoke, but he forgets that this is an old building and everything creaks. I descend the back stairwell, careful not to fall on my face. It's a spiral staircase that starts out wide and then narrows like a cornucopia. I can fit with my crutches, but it is not comfortable. And I wonder if it'd be faster and safer if I hold on to both rails and hop slowly. I set the crutches down and they slip through a gap between steps. They hit the floor and bounce just a little. The noise echoes, which sends Gabe running out of his apartment. I mumble under my breath. I don't feel like talking to Gabe or anyone. My good leg is unshaven, and I'm not wearing a bra. My boobs sag a little, and my eyebrows need brushing. My mother would say that I've given up. Back then, my mother was relentless. When the steps that she had taken did not yield the results, she shaved her curls and began wearing a white scarf wrapped tightly around her head. She'd wear a white skirt cinched at the waist and a white blouse with sleeves that would open up like wings as she waltzed through our living room, chanting in a language that was neither English nor Spanish. She was a living Santeria doll. I look down and Gabe is already at the foot of the stairs. I'm okay, I say, but he skipped 2 steps and is running up to me. Let me help you, he says. How do you want to do this? Gabe has an asymmetrical smile. It's white and bright and surrounded by dimples that make him look younger than he is. I can carry you down, he insists. You don't have to do that. Please. He has a tattoo of an anchor on his right biceps. It's a bit faded and the lines aren't even. And he has veiny, manly hands, and they're so different from Rodrigo's, whose hands are feminine. He squeezes in so that we're side by side. I grab his waist and he holds mine. His shirt is damp and I can feel heat emanating through the cotton fabric. It doesn't bother me, but he addresses it anyway. I'm sweaty as hell, he says. I giggle to make him feel comfortable, or to make myself feel comfortable. I don't know. No worries. Have you looked at me? I told him. Gabe says, I wasn't going to say anything, but since you brought it up. He winks at me and I'm reminded of the men at the bar. They wink too and ask about my day and try to pay for my drinks and accidentally brush up against my leg. For the few hours I'm there, I'm interesting. Everyone talks to me. I look at Gabe. My good leg is stubbly, I tell him. He pauses and gives me a funny look. Don't mind hair. I weigh the words coming out of his mouth and I realize I don't know him well enough to know if this is who he normally is, and I don't trust myself enough to tell whether this is or isn't a mirage. He brings me to the foot of the stairs and grabs my crutches and then opens the screen door that leads to the courtyard. He extends his hand and I hold it, even though I'm okay to hold on to the wall. I notice he hasn't asked about Rodrigo and I won't ask about his wife. I imagine she's at work, but I'm not sure I care. Gabe's built several raised beds in the garden, lumber scraps nailed to one another, painted picket fence white. Tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, scallions, and basil grow in the direction of the sun. Near the metal fence that separates our yard from the neighbors, he keeps potted perennials. Help me water these guys, he says, pointing to the asters springing from a raised bed made from a repurposed car tire. I tell him I'm impressed. He tells me anybody can do this, but that isn't true. Not everyone can keep things alive. I hop forward and stick out his hand. He hands me the hose and I struggle to find my balance, so he holds me by the waist once again. First, I feel the grip of each finger. Then I feel my body pulsing just about everywhere. Before I know it, I imagine his hands prying my legs open. I grab the hose firmly, but as Gabe cranks up the water, I lose control and end up watering myself instead. Water trickles down my torso and I catch myself laughing like a child in a school playground. And I can't stop looking at his face. I grab the hose and point it at him. The stream of water hits him and he gasps. "Oh yeah," he says. He pulls it from me and hoses me down. He bends forward, holding his chest as he laughs. The cold water feels like a jolt, so I lose myself in the unbridled joy of the moment. Then I realize my cast is soaked. "Shit," he says. The faucet on the wall is rusty, and it squeaks when he shuts off the water. He rolls up the hose and hangs it on a hook. I look up to the building to see if my neighbors have seen us. Looks like it's just the two of us. "Let me get you a towel." He looks concerned. His frowning tells me that he feels guilty about the water inside my cast, which is now squishing inside, making me want to tear the cast in two. I sit on the bench, wet, like a Pavlovian dog at the first ring of a bell. He makes it back holding a towel and a robe. Before I ask, he says the robe is not his, it's his wife's. When he drapes the robe over my shoulders, his hand lingers. I stare and welcome the transgression with a smile, a wordless invitation. He steps closer. For a brief second, it feels as if we're sharing the same breath. I don't say anything when he smooths out the lapel on his hand. When he smooths out the lapel and his hand brushes against my breast. I don't say anything until my heart beats faster and it feels as if the sun has moved closer. I better go. I grip the handles of my crutches firmly, remembering the herbs. I bend over to yank a handful of basil. I hold it between my teeth and head to the door. Gabe looks at me. "See you soon?" he asks. I nod. I think of my mother. I wonder if she still thinks that it was all worth it. My father did eventually come back, just not before she had the chance to drive us to the live poultry market, where we bought the fattest chicken. At home, she wrung its neck, cut off its head, and drained the blood. She cooked and ate it, slurping its juice and licking its grease, her tongue tracing a path from knuckle to nail. We'll do a really quick one. Sorry, it's a little tricky to read out here. This is titled, "I'll Give You a Reason." I met Maria back in the 5th grade. She was the skinny girl whose mom would always pack her salami sandwiches for lunch. When I think of Maria today, I think of those slices of salami stuffed inside a hardened Kaiser roll. No lettuce, tomatoes, or cheese, just belch-inducing salami. This was back when mom was buying me outfits 2 sizes too small. That year, I was hungry all the time. It must have been why it was easy to notice Maria's sharp bones poking through the white, short-sleeved uniform shirt, and a thick black leather belt that secured her pants by cinching her tiny waist. She seemed small in more ways than one. No one picked on Maria. Still, that didn't stop her from crying every single day. The most insignificant things that did not matter to any of us, would make her cry, as if her spirit was as thin and as frail as her body. At first, she would try to keep the crying to herself by putting her slick face down against the desk. Me and the kids sitting near her would push our desk closer to hers and ask, "Maria, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" And she'd say something like, she couldn't find her sharpener, and I would think, it's just a sharpener. But I never said that out loud. Instead, I'd ask, what does it look like? And would then set out to meander around the classroom pretending to be looking for it. But it wasn't always about the sharpener. Some reason unbeknown to all of us would surface, and Maria would retreat to that place inside her head where tears were abundant and free-flowing. Everyone would gather around her like the Santa Maria Madre de Dios. She was not. If Maria hadn't cried by lunchtime, I would anxiously wait for her to begin. Her tears were the flare gun that made everything else dimmer. When Maria went a week without crying, the world felt off kilter. I once took that same sharpener from her desk, wrapped it in a loose leaf paper, then tossed it in the trash. I watched as she cried for her missing sharpener. I began to wonder what would happen if I took something bigger, a notebook or pencil case, a salami sandwich. How much would she cry then? That was the year I bled through my gym shorts while running laps around the basketball court. Everyone laughed. Mr. Sanford sent me to the nurse to take care of my business. After that day, I wasn't required to play or participate in any activity I did not want to. Maybe because she cried all the time, and Mr. Sanford didn't want to deal with any drama, Maria too was allowed to sit on the bleachers. Most days we sat in silence and I watched the rest of the class play broom hockey or volleyball, and we rarely talked. although at times I'd catch her staring at me as if looking for something. At home, I wanted to tell everyone about Maria and how she cried every day for no reason whatsoever, or for things that should not matter. But my parents were in the middle of a screaming match and my sister was not home. So I sat on my bed and I wondered where her tears came from, how they streamed on her little face with no end in sight. I wanted to know what it felt like to tap into that well so easily. Does she feel lighter? I thought of all the sad things I knew, like my grandma passing away on her bed in the DR, her yellowed skin and thinning hair pulled into a low ponytail. Then I thought of my best friend Luna and her family moving back to Brazil because they didn't have papers. They left without even saying goodbye. I pushed next to my CD player until Alanis Morissette's Uninvited came on, and just for a brief moment, I felt it, building up in my chest, working its way up to my throat. Before I could hold on to it long enough to release it, I heard my mother's voice in my head. What do you have to cry for? I'll give you a reason. I imagined her standing in front of me, beautiful, svelte, and strong. One day during PE, Maria asked if I wanted to come over. Whether my parents gave me permission or not, I knew I had to go. I needed to know what swelled and pushed against her throat. She lived above the local pet shop in the heart of Newark's Ironbound, along a busy commercial strip near seafood restaurants and Portuguese bakeries. The place had a blue awning and a wood pallet sign adorned with hand-painted puppies, kittens, snakes, cockatoos, like illustrations from a coloring book. For years, I walked past the store, stopping at the glass window to look at whichever animal they put on display that week, not knowing people lived above. Inside, there was a long, narrow hallway with kennels stacked against each wall. It was brightly lit, and it smelled like a bag of kibbles. Come this way, Maria said. She was wearing baggy denim overalls, and it occurred to me that I've never seen her without the school uniform. In those plain clothes, she looked as regular as anyone else. At the register, a lady eyed me up and down before waving hello. Her toothless grin appeared and disappeared from her face before I could even say hi. She leaned on top of the counter and looked in our direction. Maria, o que você vai fazer com ela? Maria kept walking. I'm just going to show her around, she responded before grabbing my hand. Do you want to help me feed the snakes? She asked me. I nodded and followed. Besides the movie Anaconda, the only other snake I could think of was a garden snake that I watched my grandma sweep away with a broom. That was in her house in La Romana a year ago, before she became so sick she couldn't sweep anymore. Maria turned around as if to see if I was still following her. She stared me down. Why do you take my shit? Under the hallway's fluorescent lights, her eyes were a deep brown, so dark they seemed almost black. I know it's you, she said. Her questions made me pause. I didn't think she had noticed. It was just that one time. She picked up a stick and used it to prop up the lid of the tank. The snake uncoiled its body and slithered against the pane, slowly moving its head up towards us. I watched in silence as Maria ran her fingers along its skin. Do you want to touch it? She asked. It feels like a purse or a shoe. I shook my head. I didn't have the courage to touch it. She held up the snake with both arms and took a step toward me. Her arms were suspended in the air as if waiting for a partner to join her in a dance. She clasped her index fingers together, then twirled slowly like a ballerina. The snake hung from her arms, only its head curved upwards like a tiny S. She placed it back inside the tank. Hang on, she said, then walked past the curtain that sectioned off the room. I stood there in the same spot where I'd been standing the whole time, and I watched the snake curl itself back into a coil. When Maria came back, she was holding something in her hands. You're going to want to see this, she said. She brought her hands up to my chest and opened them just enough so that I could see the blurry movement of something white squirming inside. I don't want to see this. She looked at me and held the mouse by its tail. You have to, she said, then dropped the mouse into the tank. It only took a few seconds for the snake to unravel like a whip. It gnashed its teeth and caught the mouse mid-run, then wrapped itself around its body. It tightened its grip until the mouse's feet stopped kicking and its tail hung limp off to the side. I heard the faintest squeak before Maria moved the stick out of the way and closed the lid. Don't touch my shit, she said. There, I felt it again, swelling up in my throat. It poured out of me like water from a broken fire hydrant. I ran out of the store and all the way down the street to my house. I stopped at the corner to take a deep breath. I inhaled and exhaled, counted to 10. My mother's car was parked outside the house, so I drew my arm up to my face and wiped it dry with the back of my sleeve. Thank you.
All right, so our next reader is going to be Jonathan Kline. Since receiving his MFA in storytelling from the School of Art Institute of Chicago, he has performed in New York City, Chicago, Seattle, New Orleans, Dublin, and Cork, Ireland. His performance monologue includes Conceptual Cowboy Yodeling, stories my mother told me never to tell when I was 20, in a terminal hotel. He has been visiting an artist at Edinboro University of Pennsylvania, Tulane University, New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, and many other venues. In 2011, he was awarded a residency by Santa Fe Art Institute. His stories have been published in Xavier Review, The Maple Leaf Rag, and Indigent Press. His poems have been published in Tribes Magazine, Big Bridge, Yawp, Cocktail, The Maple Leaf Rag, and the Journal of American Poetry.
All right. All right. So I've got this cool new book out. I'm going to read you a couple stories out of it. The new one is, there's a lot of letters and poems and intake form. Anyways, one of the characters, there's a lot of characters in the book. One of the characters' name is Kenneth. And so I'm going to read you 3 Kenneth stories. This one's from the new one. That is, Wisdom of Ashes was published a number of years ago, and then Bill thankfully put it together with the sequel that's a prequel, sequel, sort of, goes in both directions. The thief slid her hand through the crack in the tomb and gently fished around for the slender bone she could see from the outside. She tried to pull her hand out. The crack became a monkey trap. Her hand only fit through empty. She laughed at herself for a moment, then threaded the bone up her wrist and up out of the crack, retrieving it with her other hand. "Hello," she said to the lonely Alna. "My name is Abby." She held it for a moment, then slipped it back in the tomb and wiped her hands on her jeans with a shiver. Kenneth could hear her coming closer, so he made himself small in the dark corner of the mausoleum, praying silently and kissing his St. Dimphna medal. The iron gate squeaked, and he watched in fear as the flashlight shone over his nest, his collection of things, and then onto him. "I'm so sorry," she said, turning off the flashlight and backing out into the light. "I didn't mean to walk right into your home. I mean, I kind of knew you live here. I'm friends with the old poet, the one who talks really loud late at night. I was kind of hoping to meet you, but honestly, I didn't mean to walk right into your home." Her voice was soft, her apology sincere, even though Kenneth knew that "I didn't mean to walk right into your home" meant I didn't mean to walk in when you were home. He lit a candle and said, "Best forget that." Abby sat down and said, "My name is Abby." She said, trying not to sound like she was talking to a child or a pet. "I'm Kenneth," he replied, looking at her in the candlelight. Kenneth saw people in terms of danger and safety. Women were safer than men, but not all. Old men were safer than young men. Young women were safer than old women. "You have many beautiful things," she said, looking at his collection. A large black beetle, 3 small antique bottles, each holding blue jay feathers, 7 bird skulls, pottery fragments, piles of string and rubber bands. "You klepta? Take all them buku pretty crap, them pitch like fat turds?" Abby thought about the word klepta for a moment. Klepta. Kleptomaniac. Then she replied, "That's right. I steal things nobody wants because they're buku pretty." She reached into her bag and produced a small box of rusted springs and shook out a few in his hand. Kenneth looked at them like jewels. "Ooh, that's crazy shit, all right," and tried to give them back. "Oh no," she said, handing him the box. "It's a gift." It was old and fragile with words Dixie Mill printed on it. He accepted it as a thing of great value and importance, carefully setting it down and placing a bird skull on top. Father Pace had explained to Kenneth that if he smelled too bad, they would put him back in the white room, or the clean cage, as Kenneth called the hospital in Latin. So Father Pace arranged for him to take a bath at the YMCA on Tuesdays. The smell of the mausoleum, however, was making Abby sick. "It was lovely to meet you," she said, and rose to leave. Kenneth took out a tin can that had been decorated by a child with crayon, glitter, cotton balls, and handed her a small pink matchbox printed Petunia's Restaurant in New Orleans. Inside was a tiny, perfect gecko skeleton. "You want to bring home the dead," he said. him small, but him dead. So this is from The Wisdom of Ashes. There's offensive language in this story, so to be warned. The first blow struck Kenneth hard in the face, but didn't change his demeanor. The second was a full beer can to the back of his head. He didn't turn around to see where it came from. He looked at the man who hit him, smiled a little, and said, "Well, here we are." All 5 men surrounding him started laughing, mocking, "Well, here we are. I told you, you stupid fuck. You can't drink the half-empty beers out of our trucking track, you little faggot bum. That's Deke beer. Are you a Deke, you little freak?" Now 3 more men came out of the bar and sat on the hoods of their sports cars and watched the show. "You think you're a Deke freak? Is that it?" All the men started chanting, "Deke freak, Deke freak, Deke freak." The third blow hit Kenneth just above the navel. He doubled over and threw up. There were howls of laughter. "Ooh, bum puke." Someone kicked him in the butt so that he fell into the puddle with his face in the dirt. Caleb, the bartender, walked out of the bar as one of his fraternity brothers was pouring a beer on Kenneth's face. He lay curled up on the ground, retching with the dry heaves. Caleb gave a fake laugh and said, "Okay, boys, I think he's had enough." He was big from a tiny town in North Texas, studying pre-med on a football scholarship. He was washed with blood. Caleb pulled Kenneth by the arm, lifted him off the ground, stood him up. "Now get out of here, you little freak," he said, trying hard to hide the anguish and pity he felt. They filed back into the bar. The night smelled of jasmine and vomit. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? There? Does it work better? Caleb finished the day shift bartending at AT2 and walked to the big tree to pray. When he arrived, he found Kenneth sitting at the base of the big tree eating a Slim Jim and listening to the sound of the oryxes lowing beyond the zoo's fence. "Hey, you're that little guy from a few weeks ago." "Man, I sure am sorry. I know those guys. I hang out with them, but I'm not one of them. I hope you can believe me." Kenneth was bewildered. He'd forgotten the Deeks and the black eye. But as Caleb talked, he was starting to remember. "Those guys are assholes. I mean, you're pretty weird and all, but man, that just wasn't right." "Well, here we are. Best forget that." "My name is Caleb. What's your name?" "Kenneth." "Kenneth, do you know Jesus?" "Christus Spiritus Sancti, Mary Dimphna." "What are you saying? Is that Latin or something?" "Goddamn monkey talk," Kenneth said and held out his St. Dimphna medal. "Oh, so you're like Catholic then?" "Yeah, I'm a Christian." "You're into a Christian church?" Talking, Brad, them buku crazy shit. Peck her out, them say good boy." "Well, here we are, Mary Dimphna, let me go." "No say good boy." "Let me get this straight. You went to a Christian church and someone pulled their pecker out." Caleb chuckled in disbelief. "No joke, buku crazy, bad shit. Best forget that. Well, you come to my church and I promise ain't nobody gonna be pulling their peckers out." "Shh," Kenneth said. "Spiritus Sancti. That's just some big antelope at the zoo. All creatures great and small. Listen quiet. God talk." Caleb listened. He started to pray but stopped. The oryxes pawed at the ground and lowed in deep, hollow tones. Caleb felt a deep calm come over him as he repeated the words in his mind. All creatures great and small. Thanks.
Thank you very much to our readers, and thank you all for coming. If you'd like to speak to the artists, they're still here. There's still coffee. There's still cookies. If you want to talk about images, hey, let's have a good time.